Welcome to WPVM's public service programming, serving the Asheville community and the surrounding area. Today's forum features three candidates running for the upcoming Asheville City Council primary on March 3rd. Candidates are Maggie Ullman, Dan Ferrell, and Jeffrey Burroughs. There are 20 candidates in total, and WPVM has extended invitations to all of them. This is the first in a series of 3 forums, with additional sessions taking place on January 27th and 28th. Our moderator for the series is Dr. Chris Cooper, and we'll now turn the programming over to him to begin session 1. And thank you all for participating.
Everybody, welcome to the first of 4 Asheville local government candidate forums presented by WPVM, the voice of Asheville. 3 of these are going to be for city council and 1 for mayor. I'm Chris Cooper. I'm a professor at Western Carolina University, and I have the honor of being your host today. I want to thank everybody for listening in. And I really want to thank our candidates. Running for office is a tough thing to do. I don't think we spend nearly enough time thanking people for being politicians and actually for running for office. So my hat's off to everybody who we're going to talk to today and in future iterations of this who are going to run for office. Before we get to the candidates, their platforms, and our conversation, I want to remind folks of just a few things about this election. While this election does affect everyone who lives in Western North Carolina, just the people who live in Asheville city limits are able to vote. It's not unusual to not be sure if you live in the Asheville city limits. You may have that address, not actually live in city limits. If you're confused, just go to the website for the Buncombe County Board of Elections, give them a call, send them an email. They're incredibly helpful, and you can find a sample ballot and see what's actually going to be on your ballot. As a reminder, today's forum is for the March 3rd primary. Mail balloting is actually already underway. So we've actually already had ballots cast and accepted in Buncombe County and throughout the state. In-person early voting begins February 12th and runs through February 28th at 11 sites throughout the county. If you are not registered to vote, as of the time we're talking today on January 26th, it's still no problem. You can create that, complete that process by February 6th, or you can complete that process during same-day registration during the early voting period. It's important to note you cannot do that on election day, so you need to take care of any registration adjustments either through same-day registration or through other means by February 6th. This is a nonpartisan election, meaning that regardless of which primary ballot you select, you're going to see these candidates on your ballot, the ones today, as well as 17 others. We do have 20 people running for Asheville City Council, which is a big number, and I think speaks to the interest in local government, the interest in local politics, the interest in this election. You're going to select 3 of those on your ballot. The top 6 will then move on to the general election ballot in November. You'll see those same candidates again, or at least 6 of them. Ultimately, 3 will fill seats on the Asheville City Council. So we have 3 candidates here today. I will allow them to introduce themselves in a minute, but just real quick, one more preambulatory thing is about the rules. So each candidate's going to begin with a 1-minute opening statement where they're going to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them. They're also going to end with 1-minute closing statements. In between those 2 goalposts, I'm going to ask some questions. Each candidate's going to have 2 minutes to respond. Rebuttals, if there's any that are required or requested, will be given 2 minutes. We're going to make sure that everybody has an even chance on those. So with that, we're going to begin with our opening statements, and we will start with Jeffrey Burroughs, and then we're going to go to Dan Ferrell, and then we're going to go to Maggie Ullman. So Jeffrey.
Hello, and just thanks for putting this together, Chris. This is an exciting opportunity. I'm so thrilled to be here. This is our first go, so I'm super pumped. If you don't know me, I am the current president of the River Arts District Artists in the River Arts District. I serve in that capacity 8 months prior to Helene. I'm also an artist in the River Arts District, a small business owner downtown, and the current chair of the economy for the Hurricane Helene recovery boards. Fun fact that a lot of people don't know about me because I'm so sparkly, I actually am a farm boy. So I grew up in the farmlands of Michigan, southwestern Michigan, where my first job was detasseling corn. I worked the assembly line, second and third shift. So I always like to say I'm like that salt of the earth, but I did spend 20 years in New York City before coming here 5.5 years ago. So it's like salt of the earth, covered in pollution, but entrenched in North Carolina clay, especially after Hurricane Helene. So, and that was one of the big things that I think inspired me to step forward and open the lens to serve at a greater capacity. I was curious in the beginning if being a community organizer would actually remain more effective. But as we were building back and we were leading recovery in the River Arts District, it appeared that there could be potential policy gaps. And it just really became obvious that it was time to step up and serve and widen the lens and help grow this vision of what we want the future to be. So that way we have affordable places to live here, we can thrive here and build back after Hurricane Helene with such great intention and vision that it's something we can all be very, very proud of. So it's something that I'm excited about, and I continue to look forward to extrapolating some of these details further and how we can support housing, recovery, small businesses, and our creative economy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Dan?
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful that we all have the opportunity to talk about what's important here for our neighbors, because in this day and time, like, it's one of the most important things we can do. So I'm Dan Ferrell, and I'm running for city council because I look around Asheville and I see a city that's working perfectly for tourists sometimes, but it's breaking the backs of the people who serve them. We're facing a pretty simple math problem here. We have Chicago-sized rents on Asheville-sized wages. And for the last 15 years, the city strategy has been to let private developers build luxury apartments and pray that affordability trickles down. But I mean, we can look around. It hasn't really worked for anyone. So I spent the last 6-7 months proposing a new plan called the Asheville Foundation, where we stop handing out subsidies to developers and start acting like our own public developer. We can use city land to build housing co-ops that are homes that teachers, nurses, service workers can actually afford to own, not just rent, because that's the problem right now. We have this massive class of renters, but most of the money that exists here goes out at the first of every month to Charlotte, to New York City, places that aren't here. We have the tools to keep the wealth in Asheville and to keep the money circulating in our town. And I'm running to make that happen.
Great. Thanks so much. Maggie?
Hey, y'all. My name is Maggie Ullman Berthium, like perfume, but I go by Maggie Ullman. And I think it's really important every candidate answers the question, why are we running? What's the point? And for me, I'm running for re-election. I've already been in office for 3 years here after serving as a staff person for 7 years previously in my career when I started and led the city's climate change program. And when I think about why another 4 years, I reflect, like, for example, this past month, my husband and I have been touring Medicaid eligible assisted living facilities for my father-in-law, who we moved here to care for about 2 months ago. And while we're walking through the halls of this facility, like, I wasn't thinking about politics or policy. I was thinking about dignity and whether the place felt safe, whether the staff had the time they need to do the work they're charged with, whether this community would support him at 94 as his needs have changed. And walking those halls, it reminds me that the systems we talk about, housing and transportation and affordability, they aren't abstract. They can't feel that way, but they shape whether people can age with stability and respect, and whether families can make impossible decisions with some peace of mind. Serving on council, I've really come to learn that even though sometimes people think council's about big debates and policy dialogues, most days it's about whether the basics work for people at their most vulnerable and whether we're planning ahead instead of scrambling later. So I'm really running for re-election to keep doing that steady, unglamorous work to strengthen those systems and make sure Asheville works not just when things are easy, but when people need it most, like after Hurricane Helene or during the pandemic or during countless other emergencies that I've led through in the 3 years I've already been on council.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. I'm going to ask a question in a second. And for this one, we'll start with Dan, and then we'll go to Maggie, and then we'll go to Jeffrey. So my guess is we're going to probably end up in some negative territory today. We're going to talk about some things that need to be improved from each of your perspectives. But I thought maybe we just start off with something a little more positive. What is one thing the city of Asheville does particularly well? And how will you work to maintain progress on that issue when you're in office, if you're in office? Dan?
Honestly, one of the things I think that Asheville does really well is prioritize its parks. As a frequent visitor of our parks, somebody who uses our recreation centers on a pretty regular basis, we have really nice facilities and we take good care of them. And I think the community understands this, which is why we voted to have a bound for improving parks and recreation in 2024. Like, it's something that's really important to us. Like, we live in a vast outdoor beautiful wilderness, and we have parks to bring a lot of that closer to home. We have swimming pools that we're trying to rebuild after the hurricane. We have rec centers that get a lot of use. My kid's in basketball right now in Shiloh, doing it every Tuesday night. Like, these are places that build our community together and build our sense of place. And they're also really important. Something I think the city does a really great job managing and doing.
Great. Maggie?
Kudos or agree. That was really well said, Will. Sorry, I keep wanting to call you Will Ferrell, but I know your name is Dan. Apologies. Okay, wait, can we start my name again? Anyhow, I agree. I think our parks are really critical. I think our community spaces are as well. When I reflect on what's gone really well, I think of what the community response could have been after Helene versus what the response was. You know, at the same time that we were recovering from Helene, the south of Spain had some terrible, terrible floods. And the prince and princess of Spain went down into the southern part of the Spain. They were like, people threw tomatoes at them. They were booed. People were so disappointed in their government. At the same time, we were getting love letters to our linemen. So I am so proud of our emergency response, both during Helene, I mean, even this weekend, the level of preparedness and sacrifice and service we've seen from our public service workers just makes me really proud to be part of that. So I'll stop with that. I think our response efforts have been fantastic, and I'm really proud of how we're recovering and continuing to drive forward after Helene.
Great. Jeffrey?
Hello. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Parks, community response, such incredible things. And I think we all lived and experienced how we initially just stepped right up and kind of knocked on our neighbor's door and checked how everyone was doing. I think in addition to that, another thing that we do well is create culture. Our arts and culture segment, whether it's food, fine art, fine craft, our music venues, our incredible bar scenes, we have a very lively, budding culture that helps define the character of Asheville, which is why people want to stay here and afford to live here, and why people want to visit. And it's something that's so unique that a town of our size has so many small businesses that help kind of define like the rituals of our day and our lives. And we get to share those with people that are coming here, but these are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are our colleagues. And that just brings it right back to community. Like there's nothing better than culture and community. They just really go hand in hand. And I think that is something that is so defined. I know for me, when I got here, the River Arts District was one of the reasons why when I took that breath there, I was like, this is home.
That's great. So thanks to all three of you for that. I'm going to sort of use moderator's discretion, see if I can follow up real quick with each of you. I think you all, so it sounds like parks from Dan. We heard emergency response from Maggie. We heard culture from Jeffrey. All obviously very articulate, well said statements. But I want to kind of follow up on the last piece of that with each one of you, if I can. What would you do to maintain progress on that issue when and if you are on Asheville City Council? So we'll just kind of start the round robin back with Dan on that one.
Are we talking about all three of these, or just what
on yours? Yes, exactly. So you mentioned parks. What would you do if you were on City Council to continue the progress on parks?
So a lot of what needs to just continue to happen is prioritizing our green spaces. And we have a beautiful plan about the next 10, 15 years about how we want to build and connect our green spaces together. And I think that's really important. The critical issue, I think, is how do we stop letting green spaces push people out of their homes? Because there's an affordability thing that happens when you start building all these beautiful things. It's like, it's great. The housing prices go up. People who are supposed to enjoy the benefits get priced out of their area. So one of the things that I think is really critical that we do is figure out a way to keep affordability down, even while we're adding these sort of green spaces. It's incredibly important, because if we want to keep our character, if we want to keep our community, if we want to keep our culture that exists as a place that is warm and welcoming and engaging, we can't keep pushing people out all the time because of housing prices.
Okay. Maggie?
Yeah, thanks for the follow-up question. When I think about our recovery, I think the number one, and this is honestly one of my top priorities at large, like in general for what I would like to do on council in the next 4 years, is make sure that we can follow through with both getting the federal resources for recovery, but then also implementing all the work that needs to get done. Just for some context, the city's annual budget is around $250 million, and we're expecting $1 billion of federal recovery. That is enough to transform many parts of our infrastructure and community. And it's very tenuous. Anyone who's watching the federal news can see that that's not certain that we'll get that. That's why it's important we have skillful diplomacy. I've spent time with something called the WNC Partnership, which is bipartisan and rural and urban leaders from Western North Carolina. We've gone to DC multiple times. We've been building relationships to ensure that we have stability in the relationships at the White House and in DC to ensure that we're getting our money. And so that type of work is really necessary when it could be very fragile. And that's just getting the resources, right? Then we need to pursue the other side of having very skillful budgeting and prioritization of, several different pots of money. We could spend $1 billion just on water infrastructure and it would be well spent. Right? So how are we going to prioritize what's the most important? I'm proud to say that tomorrow at City Council, we'll be reviewing nearly $15 million in small business grants to get out to the community. It's some of the first money of our CDBG-DR money. And that's something that needs to come out. We need to be supporting our economic recovery for our small businesses. And so I think for moving forward on council, it's staying big picture with effective diplomatic advocacy, as well as really rigorous follow through to ensure that timelines don't slip, that parks get rebuilt, that our water system is climate smart, and having the ability to go from the big picture goals to really the technical watchdogging to make sure we spend this money diligently and effectively.
Great. Thank you so much. Jeffrey?
Thanks. So when I think about maintaining, I think that's great, but I would like to do more than maintain. I would like us to grow. I would like us to expand. I would like us to evolve. And we're doing some of that work now throughout the city of Asheville. I know in the River Arts District, we've kind of come together as a community through Unified RAD and have been shaping that in us. So I think that as we continue to shape that, the more we can work with the city, and they've been really great at allowing us the space and the opportunity to be visible and seen and heard through this process. So I think continuing to nurture those relationships, I think the more our neighborhoods can work with city staff, with city council, and then it's that humanization process, right? Like we're all friends in a way, right? We're neighbors. And the more we can have those communications, I think it helps better us and gets everyone to understand this collected vision that we're moving towards and how we implement it. And CDGBDR is one of the essential components of this growth and evolution of what we can do in our arts and culture segment. Just like Maggie said, we just went through and did a unanimous yes vote towards the $15.5 million in recovery for small businesses, which we need so desperately. There's a lot of folks hanging on, a lot of artists, a lot of business owners that really need this investment. And in order to get something like this, these are going to be the continued opportunities that help us grow. And this is a moment that we can continue to shape it.
Great. Thank you so much. Go to the next question. We'll start on this one with Maggie, then we'll go to Jeffrey, and then to Dan. The 2013 missing middle housing study, which called for more density, more altered zoning laws, among other things, has recently gotten some renewed attention. Mayor Manheimer noted the Asheville watchdog. She said, quote, "There's definitely a divide on the council," end quote, on the issue. What is your view of the missing middle study, and would you support implementation of its recommendations? Maggie, we'll start with you.
Great question. And just one little tweak, it was a
Please.
2023 study, not 2013.
You're exactly right.
It would be very alarming if it's
It
been
would.
over a decade.
It
I would be furious. So first of all, what's missing middle? It's pretty jargony in a planner land. Missing middle is really looking at things like duplexes or granny flats or quads or 8 units. It's this missing middle housing type that goes between single family and big mega apartment complexes. And the city pursued a study because we know that one, these big apartment complexes don't fit in every neighborhood, and that 67% of the city's current residential land, it's illegal to build anything but single family. And we know that not everyone can afford single family, and there's not enough space. So I think that looking at missing middle, which is kind of the nerd jargon that we use for this, is really important for us because it allows us to have more front doors for the increasing number of folks that want to be part of our community or want to move between parts of our community. But right now, our zoning is so outdated, it's illegal to pursue that. So, for example, I think I mentioned earlier, my father-in-law is 94. I would love to be able to afford an ADU, put it in my backyard, and have him on our property with us so we could provide better care. It's illegal right now where I live because our zoning isn't modernized. So not only would I support it going forward, but I've been driving it. My first year, I was able to get consensus with council to prioritize looking at housing beyond what we've done for 20 years, where we incentivize affordable housing with public dollars to the private sector, but to actually look at our zoning, our laws, and our rules. So we got that prioritized early on when I was in council, and we've been chipping away moving forward. We've already passed some of the zoning modernization where now it's easier to build homes and apartments on our big corridors where there's already water infrastructure and transit and all that type of stuff. And we can do some other specific things called flag lots or cottage courts so that folks can kind of fit homes into the landscape that we have. So it's not only something that I would continue advocating for, it's something I've been fiercely fighting for. And I'm excited to find the balance where we can welcome in neighbors without displacing existing neighbors.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Jeffrey?
Yes, the Missing Middle Report has been a really important document that helps us think about how we're going to shape and how we're going to actually build housing. And when we talk about affordability too, it's not just the 60 to 80 AMI, it's also the 30 to 50 AMI, which is deeply affordable housing, which is going to be what specifically helps support our creative teams, our workforce, our servers, our firefighters, our police force, our teachers. It's an essential part of housing that is disproportionately, we just need more and more of. The report also talks about how we need all housing, just more specifically, affordable and deeply affordable housing. So, and the study provides a clear roadmap. It says we need to build more housing, we need to protect our existing residents, and we can do both at the same time. So it's not that there's, I think through this document, it's a lack of guidance, but it's just implementation, right? So I think when we think about this, and there's been a lot of council meetings about it, and back in December, I'm interested to see what comes of Sekou's response in the December City Council meeting, where the legacy neighborhoods named 6 specific points that would help kind of create that, remove that opportunity of potential displacement and what kind of protections could be made. So that way we can ensure that folks are protected. We have policies in place to make sure, but also we need more housing. So these two things can exist at the same time. And it's time for us to all build a table big enough to sit at it together, because we needed this housing 10 years ago, 30 years ago. So I'm all about let's getting it done.
Great. All right, Dan?
You're totally right, Jeffrey. In 2008, the city had an affordable housing plan, and in it stated a lot of things that we saw in the 2023 plan. And I just find it fascinating that in that span of time, housing has just gotten more and more expensive. So a couple things to think about here. Missing middle is really important, but missing middle as a concept, not missing middle as the plan. Because when we add market rate housing into neighborhoods, what that happens is that ends up displacing some of our neighbors, which is not what we want to do. Like, because if Asheville's for everybody, then we can't really leave these people out. This is why there's such an concern in legacy neighborhoods, because of the financialization and speculation that exists in these neighborhoods. I was talking to some residents not that long ago about how they get calls once a week being like, can you sell your house to us so we can flip it? And that's going to push pressure on families to move out of their neighborhoods. So my entire platform is around a plan to actually do this. It's the 2023 gives us the permission to do what we need to do. It's the implementation that I think is really critical here. So by using specific types of housing, like limited equity co-ops, you're able to then set these buildings into such a way that our residents can be the first ones into them. So we can increase density without increasing gentrification. That's the critical thing, because when you have unaffordable housing that gets created in density, you just push people out. And it's the tale as old as time. Like, we've seen it for the last 15 years. And so we need a different plan than the one that we've done for as long as we have.
All right. Maybe I'll follow up on that one more time, kind of one more go round. I mean, is there a tension between missing middle and maintaining legacy neighborhoods, and sort of how does that, I guess, is there a tension there, or is there not a tension? If there is, how would you propose relieving it, if not solving it? And we'll just start right back in the same order with Maggie, and then Jeffrey, and then Dan.
Yeah, my experience of being part of this conversation the last really 2 years since we've dug into it is that there has been a tension. I think that there's been a conversation we've been talking about, let's get missing middle housing, but different groups of folks having different goals, but saying it's around missing middle housing. So what I mean by that is, we can be having a conversation saying, let's get lunch, but I actually want to get Asian food and you want to get Italian food. We don't explicitly name that. We didn't sit down and have the conversation of what type of lunch do we want to have, but we keep disagreeing and not getting under the same page about what our lunch plans are. That's what it's felt like, where we've said we've been trying to pursue missing middle housing so that we can address housing affordability. And I think legacy neighborhoods and folks concerned about displacement have been saying, I want to make sure that we're pursuing missing middle housing so that we don't get displaced. And so I think that there's been a lot of really necessary clarification in that very recently. And I think Jeffrey mentioned earlier that 30 days ago, maybe 60 days ago, we started getting a 6-point list of what anti-displacement strategies might work and starting to move that forward. So I think it takes that work to align and get people on the same page. And I think that we're seeing more progress in the last couple months than we have in a while. And I'm very, very hopeful and want to continue seeing that through, because if this stuff was easy, it would be done in one election cycle for all the things we talk about. Sometimes it takes this iterative community alignment and collaboration to get there. And we're on a really good path right now.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeffrey.
Yeah, this is how we started in our recovery in the River Arts District. When we formed Unified RAD, when we heard about CDGBDR, so that way we would have legs to stand on as a community, we brought in and engaged with all of our neighbors. And it wasn't just the artists, it was the businesses, developers, property owners. It was the folks at Southside, it was the folks at Weekend, because we're neighbors and we all touch each other. We're all back to back. So that was an essential part of the process. And I think the more that we're able to do that, the more we can build a larger table that we can all sit at. So that way everyone is being seen and heard. This unified plan that we created at the outset, it was a product of this Sasaki group that came and did a whole study in the River Arts District. And we had community buy-in. everybody was involved. You know, it only took a couple months, and at the end of it, we had 39 identified projects that were all agreed upon by our community. And so with that, it's then really easy for us to say, okay, so are you going to take that project? Are you going to take that project? Who are the partners we need now that we are all working on the same trajectory? And I think that's an essential part to this process, right? And as Maggie said, if it was easy, it could have been done yesterday. But I think what we need to start doing is ensuring that we have processes in place where we're directly communicating with people who maybe don't have the same amount of access to information or meetings. It's an important thing that people, as someone who has been othered a lot of my life as a young person, it's really important that we give people a voice so that way, whether or not what the outcome, they've been seen and heard and have been able to have a chance to fight for what they believe in.
Great. Thanks. Thank you. And last but not least.
So yeah, there is tension between the idea of progress and legacy neighborhoods. We saw that in the Asheville Watchdog article about missing middle housing. They wanted to portray it as like, there's two sides of this story, but in reality, we're all suffering kind of the same problem here. And it's just getting the alignment that's necessary. I think one of the things that's really important to elevate that I don't think we've talked about yet is who's profiting from our missing middle changes. And the answer is resoundingly, it's not usually our legacy neighborhoods that are profiting the most here. They're the ones usually bearing the brunt of the cost of this. The money is not being reinvested in their communities. The money is just being extracted and pulled out. So when I hear concerns from legacy neighborhoods, it's trying to understand that that's the thing. They have had a historical and constant extraction from their neighborhoods. And I think it's time we do something different with that.
Okay. Thank you very much. For the next question, we'll start with Jeffrey and then go to Dan and then go to Maggie. So as y'all all know, North Carolina is not a home rule state, which means that local governments and municipalities must work much more in consultation with state government than they do in most other states. Sometimes that relationship between the city of Asheville and the state government has been productive and collaborative. Other times, I think it's fair to say it's been tense. How do you see the relationship between the city of Asheville and state government? And more specifically, how would you, if you're on council, work with our state government as it is currently constituted to get better outcomes for the city and its residents? So we'll start with Jeffrey on that one. Oh, Jeffrey, I think we got your mic.
Thanks, Chris.
Sure.
I'm back. When we think about the collaboration and the working relationship between our local and state government, you know, it's like any kind of dance, right? You have to know how to move and when to move. So I feel very honored. I've been working with Governor Stein and his team since Hurricane Helene recovery. Actually, Maggie got a copy of it, but I had sent back in earlier this month. We've been working to create some policy changes that affect our arts and culture community here in Asheville. So that's around like getting special designations, which helps our creative workforce be more accessible to certain kinds of funds for projects that come right from the state. Some other different policy changes, like maybe a sales tax exemption on original artworks, which is being done in other cities. So I've already started working and creating that relationship in terms with the connection to our governor and to our state employees. But I think, again, it's that moment of figuring out how to dance so that way you can actually make progress. And it all goes back to finding that balance.
Okay. Dan?
I'm just like thinking, the state government's very complicated when it comes to our relationship with Asheville. I mean, even if you look over the past 100 years, like there has been lots of times where Asheville just gets like kind of like singled out once in a while and turned on its head. So finding the balance of where can we make progress without running into issues with the state government is really tricky. Like we have a lot of funding rules. We have a lot of complications when it comes to how we can do funding, how we can organize our government because of the laws that the state government sets up. So we work within a series of constraints, and that those constraints actually can provide a lot of opportunities for creative and new possibilities. So part of it is working with the state government, with people that just may not have the same views that we do, but shifting the narrative, being like, okay, this is the container we're in. This is what we're trying to do. How do we get that? Because like there's plenty of things that are like not unallowed by the government that we can actually do. It's just making sure that we are on the same page as them with like the legalities of it. Like there is a lot of complicated legal stuff that goes on when it comes to state government, because again, we're not a home rule state. We also have a lot of particular things that the state government says we can't do because it's not explicitly enumerated in the state government. So it's just a dance, like Jeffrey said. There's a dance of moving back and forth of complicated, coordinated steps that we have to take in order to make progress in the way that we need to do.
All right. Thank you very much, Maggie.
First, Chris, I really appreciate this question. I think that you just can't really operate in a local government without deeply understanding what you can and can't do. And it's so different in North Carolina than in other states. There's so many good ideas that are just straight out illegal in North Carolina. So while we do our best practice research, we have to always do the like, what's possible here. And I think when I approach this, and have been since I've been on council and before when I was the city sustainability director, I think that there needs to be careful diplomacy. And I think working with the governor is one thing, but the reality is the governor doesn't have full control either. This is a bipartisan conversation is really what it comes down to here. In Asheville, I think it's important for us to know our role and our authority and stick to that, and then look for opportunities to grow it. What I mean by that abstract language, there's times where there's things that folks might ask city council to do that the city has like zero authority on. And it sometimes can just be like virtue signaling what our progressive values are. That can be really harming. That can be really damaging. And so we need to really understand what is our job and stick to it, as well as aspiring to push what we can legally do for our values. And again, I think it really comes down to relationships. In the 3 years that I've been on council, I mentioned the WNC partnership, which is bipartisan, rural, urban, and we have built a lot of credibility in Raleigh and in DC. In Raleigh, we've pushed in $20 million of a new program for resilience packages because we've had that coalition. I also work with leaders from across the country on housing supply, and that is a bipartisan effort. I think that type of credibility goes a long way in Raleigh.
Okay, great. Thanks to all three of you. We'll start this next question with Dan, and then Maggie, and then we'll go to Jeffrey. Let's see here. The tourism industry, as y'all know, continues to drive much of Asheville's economy, but at the same time, some folks refer to it as a devil's bargain, right? That benefits the wealthy, uses public resources, and doesn't put enough back into the community. What is your view, sort of a little more abstractly, about the proper role of tourism in Asheville's economy? And then much more specifically, what specific policies would you champion on Asheville City Council to tamper the worst of the effects of this sort of reliance on tourism while obviously benefiting the community to the greatest degree possible? Dan, we'll start with you.
Oh my gosh, you just loaded so much up at the end there, Chris, of like possibilities that we could talk about.
You got 2 minutes, go!
2 minutes. All right, let's try this. Well, the first thing is we need to talk about one thing that the city did well, and that is when the DeWines were asking for money to replace and retrofit the McCormick Field. That money came from the TDA. That was a really important step to showing what we can do and why we need to do it. The TDA for too long has not paid its fair share. It is using city resources. It is causing a hole in our budget, and it's time that they paid their fair share too. So that ultimately is my general feeling on tourism. It is something that we have to navigate. It is something we have to do, but we cannot keep appeasing the tourism industry at the sake of our residents. We keep needing to make this work, and we haven't done a great job of it. Because, I mean, look, we have low wages in Asheville, and it's specifically because we are based in a tourism industry. And our rent is too high, and that creates a terrible math problem for people to have to solve every day. So making the tourism pay their fair share a little bit more would help alleviate some of the problems that we have. It's not a easy to fix solution, but it is something that we need to start like changing our orientation towards, not just letting them write checks to themselves and take money right out of town. It is something we have to do a better job of capturing and navigating within our community.
Okay, thank you very much, Maggie.
I think that the recent policy change in how the Tourism Development Authority's spending is reflective of a lot of what the community wants to see, and ultimately that industry, because they ended up joint advocating for it. And that's where there was a switch to have more of the resources go to granting into local projects and less into advertising. And I think that was a really positive direction, because the grant monies that they do give out end up improving infrastructure and supporting our community and the residents and local businesses that make Asheville great, that make Asheville attractive to others. I also think that with tourism being roughly, I think it's 19.5% of our economy, we have to be really realistic that it is important to our community. And I mean, I can think of countless folks that I went to college with at UNCA who work in that industry because that's a method for them to stay in our community. I think it's disheartening to me when I hear folks villainize the tourism industry. I just don't believe that there's some bad guy smoking a cigar in a boardroom saying, "Wah ha ha ha, I'm gonna, take it down." And I think we hear that a lot about the TDA or tourism industry. The reality is it's like Torrin Kexel, who runs an e-bike tour because he wants bicycling to be more inclusive and accessible to folks. That's just like another person in our community. I think that figuring out ways to have stronger partnerships, Dan, I appreciate you brought up the McCormick Stadium. Now, the TDA did pitch into that, as did the city and the county. And I think as we look at rebuilding the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium, that's an amazing place for the tourism industry to contribute as well. We know that when the current Thomas Wolfe has a concert or a performance, bartenders are going to be getting better tips because all the restaurants are full. And so I think there's a real value to understanding the balance of where tourism and mostly where government support of tourism lives, and that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there needs to be a check.
Okay, great. Jeffrey?
I have so much to say on this topic, so I'm going to try to consolidate and focus. As somebody who is a small business owner and artist in Asheville, I know that in general, even just from our space in the RAD, 80% of our sales come from zip codes outside of Asheville. And that is a truism for most of, I won't speak for everybody, but for most people that I know that are not necessarily in the food and beverage lane, we are heavily reliant on the tourism industry. Now, should tourism be our only focus? No, it's number two. I believe healthcare and then tourism and then government. I think those are our top three. Don't quote me, but it's somewhere in there. So it isn't actually, there is a little misconception that it's like the number one. It's actually our number two economic driver in terms of just our revenue. But it is very important. And regardless of, I always like to say, I think it's I find it to be a very, I don't want to say privilege, but that's the word that comes to mind. Response when people say, "Oh, we need to get rid of tourism." And I'm like, "Oh, you must be someone who doesn't have a job that relies on tourism. That you aren't somebody that has an impact. You might be a remote worker, or you have a job somewhere else. You reverse commute, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. But we need to create space for everybody to be able to be successful in this community." The TDA also, like some of the budget is actually managed by the state, so they don't get an entirely say in everything that happens. But the growth of things like the LIFT fund, tourism are super essential to the development and growth of our city, and how the TDA can invest back into projects that will specifically help people have an enjoyable life here, that also then makes want people to come and visit here. But one last real quick thing is, when we think about workforce development, we do get some interesting possibilities of employers that have different growth strategies and training options that sometimes, like small businesses like me as an entrepreneur, don't have those same kind of heightened growth structures. It's more parallel in how it works. I have so much more I'd like to say, but I will keep it at that.
I tell you what, all three of y'all seem to want to talk about this topic more. So let's, if we just go around the horn one more time, and sort of ask y'all just for one specific policy. Could be to increase tourism dollars. It could be to combat some of the more negative aspects of tourism, but one specific policy that you would propose or support if you were on city council. And we'll just start right back around the horn with Dan.
I think we're kind of back to the same corner that Maggie was talking about earlier. It's like, so much of what we're not allowed to do with the TDA is not even in the purview of city council. Like we don't have a lot of levers when it comes to TDA. It is a county thing, not a city thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's the state government that also states how it's supposed to work. So when it comes to a specific policy, I don't think I have one off the top of my head. Like, just brutally honest, like there are things we can do, there are positions we can take, there are communications we can have. But when it comes to specific policy, like that is a much trickier and much murkier situation, because when we start introducing policy around the TDA, we immediately get a crosshair on our back from state government, and that becomes really tricky. So it's something that you would have to actually talk about in conversation with the city attorney, in conversation with lawyers, just like anything else. Like, this is one of those things that we have to be really careful and really tricky about navigating in our city. But can our position and our posture change about it? Absolutely. We can totally talk about how we can build our relationships inside of the TDA to navigate things more effectively. Like, there's just always going to be new ways and new pathways that we can talk about, given the changing landscape that we live in right now. So no specific policies here, but that's because it's kind of terrifying out there.
Okay. All righty. Maggie?
I think the specific policy that seems to be growing traction is to advocate to the state to make some adjustments to how they can spend the grant dollars so that it could go towards workforce housing. We're starting to see this idea gathering steam in the business community, particularly after anyone trying to employ anyone knows it can be very difficult. Folks are having to live further and further away from Asheville. They're having to commute longer and longer because the cost of housing is so expensive. And that makes it difficult for workers to say yes to the jobs. And so we're seeing some critical mass, I think, in business leadership wanting to advocate for that. And you're hearing me also articulate the partners responsible. It makes a really big difference when we can build the inroads with the business community to then go advocate together to the state. So that's a policy place I'd like to see us discuss more with our state leaders, is flexibility in the grant spending from the TDA to go towards workforce housing.
Great. Thank you so much. Jeffrey?
And sorry, I had to run. As I was speaking the last time, my computer went to 2%, so I had to go run and grab my charger. So forgive me for causing chaos on the screen. I'm so sorry. Agreed. There's only so much we can do, but I was equally happy to see about the possibility of advocating for this shift, combining funding towards workhouse development. But I guess in just this moment too, villainizing groups of people in our neighborhoods is never creating a beautiful, wonderful city for us all. And, I've personally gotten the opportunity to work with Vic and her team at Explore Asheville, and they championed so hard for us after the storm. They did literally everything they could to try to help ensure our recovery. So it's really hard for me sometimes to hear that, because I've had the ability to work with them day in and day out over the last year, and they're people too, and they work so hard for us. Honestly, the folks that work at Explore Asheville, I think sometimes love the city more than anybody. They are constantly living, breathing, eating our city and helping our small businesses stay afloat. Essentially because, right, like one of those, again, character defining moments of Asheville is how many small businesses we have. And I would ask, how possible would that be if we didn't have a tourism economy, if we didn't have the ability to support the difference between the people who live here, then our part-time people who live here, which is a whole other thing, and then tourism? Like, we wouldn't be able to fill those gaps, and we wouldn't be able to have all these incredible entrepreneurs, small businesses that really help define the character and shape the city that we love.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. For this next question, we'll start with Maggie and then go to Jeffrey and then go to Dan. So would be remiss if we didn't have a Hurricane Helene question in here somewhere, right? I mean, Asheville and Western North Carolina more generally continue to suffer many of the effects of Hurricane Helene. How would you assess the progress that's been made, and what specific policies would you prioritize on City Council to advance recovery in the city? So assess the progress that's been made, specific policies to prioritize and advance recovery in the city. Maggie, start with you.
Great. Glad you're asking about Helene. I think that it is needs to be a central focus for any leadership moving forward, because it is such a transformational time for our community. I think as far as assessing the progress being made, I mean, there's just some of that is our direction to the management team, right? We need to ensure that we have a new city manager who started the 12th of this month, who is led in the county for several years. She was here through Helene. She led the county through the pandemic. And so the type of methods that are really going to look at assessment are going to come from our city manager, who's the CEO of the city. So we need to be seeing progress reports and metrics and financial statements. And we're doing that right now through our policy and finance committee. But I think at a leadership level, a lot of this is making sure that we don't get comfortable with the bureaucratic grind that just slows down over time. We just need to make sure that this remains a top priority. We keep pushing for timely results, pushing for creativity through the red tape that FEMA introduces that we have to start navigating like a limbo pole. As far as policies to advance recovery, I think that one of the most substantial things City Council specifically needs to look at is where and how we can build in relation to the river. And I think that it's not a black and white, we can't build, or everything can build. I think the gray zone is very, very complex. In my day job, I'm an environmental advocate. I work on climate change and have for nearly 25 years. And honestly, before Helene, I probably would have said with more certainty that we should get out of the river. We shouldn't be building near the river. I can't say that anymore. After working hand in hand, shovel to shovel with folks who were directly impacted, it is not, we don't have the privilege of the luxury of just saying, let's retreat. We need to find the middle zone of what climate smart infrastructure and rebuilding looks like. And that is a policy conversation for zoning and development regulation.
Great. Thank you so much. Jeffrey?
Hello. So Hurricane Helene recovery, again, still live, eat, breathing it every single day. And the progress, you know, one thing I want to give a shout out to the city staff. They have been so great to work with over the last year and a half. And honestly, they turned their heads a little bit so we could get some things done quickly. So I'm really great. I didn't say that. But they did end up introducing the TAP program because of us. But I'm glad that I can wear that as a badge of honor. But I'm grateful for the work that we've done and for how we've been able to come together as a community. I'm a part of a group that was selected to go to New Orleans and work with leadership that was instrumental to the Build Back and Recovery after Katrina, with that developed the Unified New Orleans Plan. And one of the things that when they came and visited us is they were astounded by how far our city had gotten in such a short amount of time. And we learned a lot about how to build capital stacks in recovery and how you bring in different partners from nonprofits to government agencies, historic preservation. So a lot of that is going to then lead us to the policy question, which Maggie was touching on. And so we can have this vision for what it should look like, what the city should look like post-recovery. But how is policy going to either delay or become a barrier through those recovery projects? So again, this goes back to time. So we talk about what's the vision, what are the policies that are going to help support it, how can we remove barriers where it's important in terms of how policy is going to either potentially slow down or halt recovery. And I think it's important for us to remember too that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for development. And this is a time where we can also think about the folks who have been either, and I talked about this if you check out the Economy Hurricane Helene Recovery Board meeting, but this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we need to make sure that we're investing in the folks that have either been disproportionately impacted or just are systemically marginalized as well.
Great, thank you so much, Dan.
I'm really glad you finished with that, Jeffrey, because I was like, that is one of the most important things to me. It's like, are we making whole the communities, the families that have been upended by this? Like, are we able to bring them back into the single garment of our existence right now? And to what Maggie said, like, we aren't quite in the luxury where we can fully retreat. We don't have the space to do that. And if we want to keep people here, we're going to have to be really, really creative. We have a couple problems though. One is that obviously we are dealing with bureaucratic red tape from the federal government. That is just a thing that is existing, and it would have existed previous to the Trump administration too. Just want to notate that is a thing that happens. But to navigate that, we have to be communicative and we have to be clear on what our goals are and how we're actually meeting them in the city and for the people. And if we can do that, if we can talk about timelines and timeframes and what we're actually trying to do on a large scale, like have that cohesive plan that we're able to build, and then have the buy-in of the community, we're going to do great things with this. Like this is good chance for us to build something new and something beautiful and something brilliant. It's just going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of communication and trust from our citizens and our residents, our neighbors, and the people impacted most by this. It's just going to be a difficult thing that I'm very excited that we have the chance to do right now, because if not now, then when?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one more question before we go to closing statements. I'm just going to ask y'all, we're running real tight on time, so if there's any way to keep this one a little more condensed, I'd appreciate it. And it's a real simple question. We'll start with Jeffrey. What is one issue we're not talking enough about? Jeffrey.
One issue we aren't talking enough about, I think my brain wants to go to so many different things. And where would it be most effective to land on? I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about are things over the last year or even right before the storm were things that were topics that weren't getting enough attention inside of housing, marginalized communities, tourism. I think these are all conversations that were very stopped and misunderstood, and now there's light being shown on them. Also, sorry, what was the question again? What was one?
Just one issue we're not talking enough about.
I think one of the things that I haven't heard a lot about yet is the impact of what's going on at the national level and what the outcome could be, or what we can do as a community, and when it's necessary. And for example, so we're talking about what's going on in Minnesota, and who are our community leaders that we're looking to, like Sombra, that can help us lead this conversation. I saw yesterday on social media that there's talks that the resolution is being brought up again. I would just hope that as this conversation continues to occur and happen, because it's going to be necessary, that the folks who should be leading that charge are guiding it, and we can help support. So I would look for someone to like Sombra to guide and impact what we need to be doing at the local level. And that would be, again, my kind of community way that I would want to interact with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Dan?
What's funny is that I am part of the group that repushed the thing. And actually, this was actually partially thanks to Maggie in the conversation I had with her a couple weeks ago of identifying where the blocks were and helping navigate what needs to be done next. So I have a really strong position. I'm going to move my camera up just slightly. most of my work, that for everyone who is listening and not watching this, it says ICE out. One of the things that I organize most around within our community is community defense and what happens if ICE shows up here. This is what I spend most of my day doing. I may be on social media here and there talking about it, but like most of it is, how do we protect our community? How do we protect our neighbors? Doesn't matter if they're immigrants, if they're trans, if they're LGBTQ, if they look a little bit different from what the federal government thinks is allowed. I want to protect our neighbors, because if not them, then who? Who are we actually here to protect? So part of what we did was we're working with businesses to help develop training plans for if ICE comes to town. We're working with communities and neighborhoods to develop what happens if ICE comes to town. We are training them in our area in concert with local leaders. That said, that's not what I wanted to talk about, though. I actually just wanted to talk about food insecurity, because as someone who spent a lot of time in November working with families who were food insecure because of the cut SNAP benefits from the federal government, we have a massive issue of affordability when it comes to living in Western North Carolina. It's not just housing. It's not just childcare. It is food costs too that are absolutely impacting our community. And one thing that we really need to do and really need to focus on is, how are we going to keep our neighbors fed? How are we going to do it? We did an amazing job of this during the hurricane. And I really, really want us to continue talking about this in a deep level of, how do we make sure our neighbors get fed? How do we make sure our kids don't go hungry at night? How do we make sure we are taking care of our neighbors?
Great. Thank you very much. Maggie, one issue we're not talking enough about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that folks brought up the conversation we've been having around ICE as a community and as a nation. I think that, as Jeffrey was mentioning, when City Council didn't pursue the resolution earlier, that was at request of leaders in the immigrant community. And if that's changing, I want to hear where this is going and how City Council can support. As far as something that we haven't talked about on this call so far, I think and something that's really directly in City Council's leadership purview, is how we are navigating supporting the unhoused. We are seeing increasing amount of folks falling off the edge and falling onto our sidewalks and being in our communities. And I believe that folks who are unhoused, it could be you, it could be me, it could be your brother. It's not a moral deficiency. It's a structural failure of society, whether it's cut funding at the national or state level in healthcare or mental health or the growing sweep of addictions. In the last several years, the city has increased funding for the number of shelter beds. I think that's quite the important bit of progress. We know that there aren't enough beds for folks to go to safely if they want to. We also have diversified our public safety response. So now if you see someone having a mental health emergency and call 911, they can deploy a team of firefighters who aren't armed and who have the time and space and training to work with that person to get them to a safe outcome. And so having more shelter resources for the unhoused, having more of a diversified public safety response that can really center the humane reaction in response to our unhoused is important. And then what I'd say, in conclusion on the topic is, I think we also have a lot more community conversations. I get to talk to folks from every neighborhood, and not everyone has the same opinion as we see conflicts between residents and the unhoused or businesses and the unhoused. So if we can grow shared understanding, I think that is important for us to lead on.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And now we'll just do 1 minute closing statements. And before that starts, I want to thank everyone for listening. And of course, thank our candidates for their time, not just today, but in running for office. So we'll, for the closing statements, go to Dan first, and then Maggie, and then Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chris. So we've covered a lot today, from recovery to the TDA to just a lot of things that are actually impacting our neighbors. But I want to just come back to it. Like, the common thread is, we're going to fix this ourselves. The state legislature isn't going to fix our rent prices. The TDA isn't going to fix our water system. We're going to fix this ourselves. And it's why I'm pushing so hard about housing. We need to be able to finance our own housing, build our resilience. If we cannot stay here, we are not the community we are trying to save. We can't control what Raleigh or Washington does, but we can control what we build. We can control what our policy is, and we have to do it in respect for our neighbors, and we have to do it right now. So I'm asking just for people to consider voting for me, just because I am deeply and intrinsically connected with the idea that our neighbors all deserve to live here.
Okay, thank you very much. Maggie?
Again, my name is Maggie Ullman Berthume, so look for that on the ballot. And I ask for your vote for many reasons, one of which is that as I look at the 3 years I served, I started and it was COVID. We immediately went to a winter water crisis. I was on the front lines during Helene. I've personally been tested. Our systems and our trust in government has been tested, and all of the leaders have. And I think that that type of experience needs to continue churning forward so that the systems really change. That takes time and it takes steady leadership. Things that I really believe we need to work on is the nuance and complexities between more affordable housing so that it's not just available for new people coming in, but that it stays affordable for folks who live here. That we need skillful diplomatic leadership stewarding the $1 billion of climate or federal recovery so that it goes to climate smart infrastructure and that we don't just build back the way things were. And that we need to really ensure that when we're serving the public, we're serving for the public, those that are most vulnerable. I've been doing this for the past 3 years. Previously, I worked in City Hall for 7 years, leading the city's climate change program. My experience is tested and true, and I'm really ready to continue serving.
Thank you very much. Jeffrey, you'll close us out.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we are at an inflection point in our city. And with that, there becomes a lot of possibility when anything can be changed or shifted or guided. And I've always been a bridge builder. I've always been a community organizer and activist.